Okay, good evening, attendees of the Northwest Battery Park City Resiliency Project community meeting of November 30th, 2023. This is the online portion of the session. I'm Nick Spordone from the Battery Park City Authority. I'm joined to my right by Rachel Wilkins from BIG, which is an urban design firm, and to Rachel's right by Joe Marone from Arcadis, to valued members and firms of the greater Northwest Battery Park City Resiliency project team. So with that, we certainly wanted to make sure that we had the opportunity for those of you who are joining us remotely this evening to receive any questions you might have online. If you do have those questions, please go ahead and use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to type your questions in. We will be capturing all the questions that are asked this evening. We'll read them in once we receive them for the benefit of all those who are joining us, as well as those who may like to watch the recording thereafter. And then we will do our best to answer the questions to our ability. And if we need to go ahead and let you know that we owe you a follow-up, we will certainly have that as well added to the question and answer document to be compiled and then placed on our website after the meeting. So with that, welcome again, and we will be here until 8:30 to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and take the first question. This one's from Robert. The question is, I take it that it will not be possible to sit in on the tree table discussion from online. That is correct. Unfortunately, we're able to answer questions here in this discussion, but we can't sit in on that discussion with this forum. The second question was from Beth, and the question is, based on some of the discussion tonight, will there be a more specific session to discuss reaches 5, 6, and 7 and the unanswered questions tonight about certain choices and ability to use different designs, especially to open up the sightlines? It's a really good question. I think that that's some of the feedback that we received tonight and that we'll take into consideration at the next community engagement meeting. It does sound like people want to be able to have a Q&A session per reach, which is something that we'll take into consideration moving forward. If there are any specific questions that you'd like to put in the chat tonight, right now, I can do my best to answer them.
Okay. Rachel just very helpfully had answered one of the questions that came in. Joe points out that he does have the tree presentation here. If there's a specific question that someone does have about trees, we certainly can do our best to answer it. And of course, if there's something that we need to get back to you with respect to an answer on, we can do that. But if there are particular questions about trees or something you'd like to see, then please feel free to put it in the Q&A. We can read it into the record, and then we can try to answer it. Okay. We've got a couple new questions here. We're going to read them in, and then we will try to take these in place and we'll try and take these in turn. Okay, Nancy writes, thank you for your time and efforts. The gardens you've shown in River Terrace and Wandering Nature Path of the South Esplanade seem to be at grade. How will you protect these gardens from wandering children and dogs? Do you have a fence detail? Hold on one second. Okay, Rachel.
Thanks for your question, Nancy. We do have what's called a plant railing detail that you see out on the site right now. There's a lot of different details for what these plant railings look like, and designing one that is specific to this project is going to be part of the design. These planting beds will be protected from children and dogs. It's a really good question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. Next question is from Catherine. How does the total amount of tree canopy of your plan compare with the total amount of tree canopy required by law? That is the time of plan completion, not 20, 25 years when many trees reach maturity. I don't know, Joe or Rachel, can you take a tree question?
I can attempt to answer that question. I'm going to be honest, I'm not super familiar with what the laws are regarding tree canopy coverage. Let me pull up the question again. I can tell you that a lot of the trees that are on site right now, especially the larger trees, are not in particularly good shape. What's happening is that the trees are installed on top of platform where there isn't a lot of soil volume or room for the roots to grow. So what happens is that the roots get root bound. So the roots start to grow and twist around themselves, and it does limit the health, the longevity, and the canopy size of the tree. As we move forward in the design, providing new trees with adequate soil volumes is a big design consideration.
Thank you, Rachel. There's a question here from an S ring. Can you share what is being presented at the tree table? Joe, did you have that online by any chance? Can we put that in a link to it, or what do you think?
I think it'll be shared after the.
Okay, you don't have it. Okay.
But I mean, we could, if there's a specific question, we can.
Okay. Okay. So the answer to that is yes, we can share it. We don't have it available right now to go through electronically, but all the materials from this evening's presentation will be added to our site over the next day or so. The video, the presentation, this session, and each of the presentations at the breakout tables. So thank you for that. Next question is from Beth. Beth writes, at an earlier meeting, the end of Rector Place seemed to include an elevated green playground, but tonight seems to indicate it will be a conversation space. Could you clarify what is contemplated?
Hi, Beth. So what you're referring to is what we're calling the programmatic nodes, and that's where we have the three street ends, West Tame, Rector Place, and Albany Street, that terminate into the project. So they kind of come up onto the esplanade. And so the design team has chosen those spaces to put these kind of strategic programmatic nodes. And some of the design considerations were what is the geometry that's there currently, or what is an adjacent program that we could highlight with these new outdoor spaces. At Rector Place, we did propose a conversation room for two reasons. One, we wanted to provide an outdoor space where we could accommodate some of the programming that's already going on site. So this could be used as an outdoor reading room, or it could function as an outdoor, performance space for a small performance. Another thing that we took into consideration in the design of the space is kind of the semicircle nature of the space as it is now.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. Catherine writes, thank you for your extensive work and your presentation. Catherine, thank you, and for all the participants, both online and in person this evening. We know it's a big project, and we know that there's a lot to it. It's complex, but we have a great team, and we have a great community, and thank you for taking the time to be a part of it. It'll be quite a ride to work through this with everyone, but we know it's a worthy endeavor, and we're glad to have such an engaged community join us every step of the way. Okay, next question is from a Salazar. How is funding for the project done? Will it raise pilot or ground rent for residents? I'm so glad you asked this question. And the answer is, it is being funded by bonds issued by the Battery Park City Authority, and it will not raise pilot or ground rent for residents. Now you may say, well, Nick Spordone, how can that be true? And it's because PILOT, which stands for those of you who may be unfamiliar with the term, it's an acronym that stands for Payment in Lieu of Taxes, and it is in essence the real estate tax that folks elsewhere in the city pay in Battery Park City. It's the functional equivalent, but it's called Payment in Lieu of Taxes. PILOT is set by not the Battery Park City Authority, although we collect PILOT from each building, be it residential or commercial. PILOT is set by the City of New York. It's a combination of the tax code, which is deliberated and voted upon and passed by the City Council, and the assessed value of the property, which is set by the Department of Finance. So the Battery Park City Authority collects PILOT, but does not in any way set the PILOT. The other portion of the Battery Park City Authority's revenue each year comes from ground rent, which is the rent that the buildings, both commercial and residential, pay the Battery Park City for the renting of the land that the privately owned buildings are on. The buildings are privately owned. The ground is owned by the state of New York by and through the Battery Park City Authority. So the buildings pay the Battery Park City Authority rent for the ground that the buildings are on. Ground rents are set by the individual leases as negotiated by each building and by the Battery Park City Authority in some cases decades ago, in some of the cases of the newer buildings, maybe 10 or 12 years ago or so, but each building is on its own lease with the Battery Park City Authority that were negotiated between the authority and the developer at the time when the building was scoped and built and developed. So the lease terms are set. The amount that each building pays the Battery Park City Authority each year is set, and it's unaffected by the amount of bonds that we issue to finance these or any other of the capital projects that the Battery Park City Authority undertakes. What does happen with that money is we use it to finance the bond, and we use the money we get each year, both from PILOT and from ground rent, to pay down our debt service and to set our operating budget each year to maintain, among other things, Battery Park City's parks and public spaces. And then the balance of that money goes back through to the City of New York. So while PILOT and ground rent allow us to finance our projects, it is not impacted by the issuance of debt to pay for those projects. So I hope that's helpful. We try to explain that as often and as clearly as we can. I'm not sure how good a job I did with it, but short answer is no. It will not raise PILOT or ground rent for residents because they are established separately from how these projects are financed. Okay. Next question comes from Nancy. She says, with respect to garden protection, can or might your fence detail be used throughout BPCA in the future to protect all the gardens with continuity? Rachel?
Thanks for your question, Nancy. I love that you're protective of the planting spaces. We are too. Yes, there is potential for this design to be used elsewhere at BPCA. There are already some existing plant protection fence details throughout the project, especially at Reach 7 or what we're calling South Cove. I believe that this protection detail is part of the art installation that is there now, so that will likely remain. The rest of the project will have its own plant protection detail that will be consistent across this project, and then we're also happy to lend that design to BPCA to use wherever else they'd like to use it on the project.
Okay. Thank you, Rachel. Next question is from S. Ring. Will the classic New York design aesthetic that echoes Central Park, such as the hexagonal paving blocks and rustic stone look curb/walls, remain? Is that a... Yeah. Rachel, you're killing it.
So materials are a big part of the project that we haven't discussed yet. They're a part of the design that is still undergoing development. And one of the most important considerations for this material design is that it fits in with the existing character of the site now. I can tell you with certainty that hexagonal pavers will be used throughout the project. We're kind of starting to think of hex pavers as the material that stitches the entire project together because it is pretty quintessential New York. They're also easy to maintain and maintenance people are very familiar with them. For the rest of the materials on the project, we are taking into really delicate consideration that we're not proposing something that is completely new and alien to the site.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. Catherine, next question is, thank you for your good work. Thank you, Catherine. A participant question was asked about the art for the project. Where would this be included, as it was not indicated or shown in the slides that I could see? And then the second question is there opportunity for artists to submit ideas or slides for art for specific locations? So I'll try to take each of these in turn. So we are, when I say we, I mean the project team is in contact with each of the artists that have pieces up and down along the path of the project site. So from north of Battery Park City on down, when Battery Park City was first envisioned and planned, one of the things that makes it so wonderful is every time you have the end of a street reach the waterfront, there is an art installation. So at Rector and West Thames and Albany and all the way up and down the Esplanade. So we are in touch with each of those artists and are working through the considerations and implications of what will need to be done for the protection of the Northwest Battery Park City Resiliency Project to function, as well as having the art preserved or reflected in an appropriate way. So there were some slides this evening that talked about what was going to be done or what was contemplated to be done in South Cove by Mary Miss. There are some other artwork installations up and down the Esplanade, like Rector Gate and the Upper Room, where we are in coordination as we speak with the artists to work through what impacts that will have. The intent, of course, is to make sure that art is reflected in a respectful way, preserved where possible. If it needs to be upgraded or moved in another way, a way that is kept in Battery Park City in a way that can coexist with the contemplated flood barrier protection. Second question is there opportunity for artists to submit slides, ideas for specific locations? I don't think at the moment we are looking for ideas for new art because, again, the idea is to be respectful of the art that exists and have it reflected in a new way with the flood barrier protection in place. That said, and I will put it in the chat, there are always opportunities for feedback through the project address. So if folks have ideas or things they would like to see with respect to art, they can certainly submit it, but we are not soliciting new ideas for new art installations at the moment as part of the project. Okay, next question is, I guess it says Salazar. I think it's Nicholas. I think it's Nicholas Salazar. It's a great first name, by the way, Nicholas. Thank you for BPCA's work and good luck with the rest of the design and beginning of construction. At what phase of design will specifics on trees be set? Great question. And will BPCA's tree canopy assessment feed into that determination? I'm going to hand it over to Rachel.
Again, great question about the trees. Right now, the design is still pretty much in flux. I want to reiterate that we're still looking at the 60% completion of the design, so things are still moving and changing as we analyze and assess site conditions and we receive additional community feedback. I would imagine that we'd get very close to having a determined tree count when we get to what's called the 90% design, and that will be in a couple months. The current deadline for that is also in flux, and I'm sure that we'll.
So we're getting to this. Sorry, just a little bit on schedule. We're getting to the 60% design in a couple of months, so 90% is still a little ways off.
Sorry. Yeah. Thanks, Joe, for clarifying. So, in order to determine which trees are able to be protected and which will need to be removed for the project, a lot goes into consideration, including construction constraints and how the contractors will access the site and so on and so forth. So as the design develops, we'll be able to kind of narrow down trees. So we'll probably have a checkpoint with the upcoming 60% design. We'll have an even better idea of the number at the 90% design, and the date for the 90% design has not been set yet.
Could I layer on this one? So I do just want to, I think this is a good point to just remind folks that this is a progressive design build project. So while you're mostly hearing from the design team at this point, we do have our contractor partners in this project. And so a big part of how we're looking at the trees and the impacts is working really closely with the folks that are going to be building the project and going down every avenue on how can we protect the most trees with this project. And it's a really interactive project working directly with the construction team to achieve that.
Okay. Thank you, Joe and Rachel. Okay, Nicholas, additionally, will there be a 3D model of all sites existing at some point? It will be effective to have physical rendition of the site to look at in addition to renderings and walkthrough. Thank you. 100% agree. It will be very effective and helpful to folks. Yes, there will be a 3D model. I don't have more specifics, I think, on timing yet. Perhaps, Joe, you can weigh in on that, if maybe?
So that actually has not been completely decided yet. It's something we're looking at and talking with Battery Park City Authority about it, Nick. So just yeah, I mean, if it's something that it's being considered for the project.
Okay, mistake. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, my apologies, Nicholas. Thank you. Okay, I don't see any other questions for now, but we're here again for the next little bit. I've put some information in the chat, both the dedicated project website, which the link is there, and then for additional questions and comments, both an email address, nwbpcrinfo@bpca.ny.gov, and the mailing address, BPCA, 200 Liberty Street, 24th floor, New York, New York, 10281, if you want to send something in writing. And we will hold for any of the questions that come in. Okay, we'll hold. Okay, can you hear me? Okay. We have another question here from Jonah. Jonah, good evening. Thanks for joining us. Jonah writes, thank you for a very informative presentation earlier. Thank you, Jonah. I have a two-part question. One, do these designs incorporate ease of access for any potential expansions or upgrades in the future? And if so, will it impact the upgrade areas for construction as much as the primary construction will? Thank you for your work. I'm going to hand this over to Joe. Jonah, thank you.
Yes, we are looking at how we can continue to upgrade this system in the future. And we call that adaptability. So the adaptability of the system will allow it to be enhanced for future storm conditions, even beyond what we're currently designing for. And the way we look at that specifically is to allow it to be adapted without having to rebuild the whole thing. And that's, so to your second question, yes, we're going to look at specifically the in-ground elements or the under deck elements, and we want to make sure those elements have sufficient capacity so that the above grade elements, which are easier to modify in the future, can be modified.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Thank you, Jonah. We are coming up on 8:30 here, but we got started a few minutes late, so we're going to try to keep this open for perhaps 5 more minutes. for any additional questions. And then again, I would note, for the benefit of the group, in the chat, I have placed both the dedicated project website address and the email address that you can send questions and feedback and comments to anytime. That's a monitored mailbox, and we will get back to you with responses in case you think of something after tonight or after that. And I also included in the chat a fairly lengthy Q&A document from the last time we did a large community meeting like this in June. It is quite substantial. It took a while to compile, but we're proud of the effort that went into it, and proud of a lot of the good questions the community asked, which helps us continue to explain this in an effective way. So that's there for the benefit of folks who may want to get caught up or understand some more of the context around where we've been in the project contextually and where we are heading. We will have a kind of a companion document like that, obviously, with the questions from this evening that will lay out the questions and then the answers updated as appropriate based on the design as it has developed in the days and months since. So with that, we'll leave it open for a few more minutes, and I thank you. Can you hear me? Okay. I think we are close to the end of our time together this evening. Unless there are any last questions, I did want to thank everyone for taking the time both this evening and to join us here remotely in our kind of online session. I will tell you the good news is that you are now in it with us together, and we have your email addresses, so you will be getting not a few emails from us about the next stages of this project, next community meetings and engagements, and we thank you all for joining us. So stay tuned. We'll be back to you with a kind of post-meeting recap with materials and with information about when you can next join us for progress on the Northwest Battery Park City Resiliency Project. I want to thank Rachel and Joe here and the entire team of folks who have made this happen, and we look forward to a bigger and better Battery Park City and a more protected one with all of you. And with that, we're gonna call it an evening. Thank you, everyone.